have noon here in the Eastern time zone. I always have to remember where I am. I'm located in Austin, Texas, so almost ready to give you the wrong time. But this is Bill Gibbs. I'll be your host for the session. I'm very excited about today's presentation, Open Source Intelligence, the Process, Method, and Techniques with Dr. Kellep Charles. I'll be introducing Dr. Charles and the presentation in just a little bit. Let me talk about the agenda that we'll be following today. And by the way, this session is being recorded, and we will make a copy of the slides, a link to the slides and a link to the recording available to all registrants. And speaking of registrants, for this session, we had over 100 people register today for the session. Not all are joining us live. Many of those will be time shifting and watching it a little bit later on demand, but it's just a great joy to see this interest in this topic today. Now, what we're going to begin with is a little bit about capital. And I always laugh when I talk about capital, because looking at the alumni and faculty and current students who are part of us, you know so much more about the institution, but there may be a few that don't. So we'll cover that very briefly. I'll have a little bit of housekeeping, then I'll introduce the presenter and we'll get right into the presentation. The bulk of our time together is our presentation. Following that, we've allowed some time for Q&A, and then at the very end, we'll talk about our upcoming webinars through the rest of the year and early next year, and how to get a copy of the recording, slides, and certificate. Now, again, many of you are extremely familiar with capital, and so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do like to mention a couple of things. One, we've been around for a long, long time, always in STEM and in the science areas. We were established in 1927, so almost 100 years of education. We're one of the few private universities in the state, and might I say in the entire country, specifically dedicated to engineering, cyber, computer science, and the management of technology. We're nonprofit, private, and accredited. Each of these are key words, but I want to really focus in on the accreditation part of it, because sometimes when people are from outside of the United States, they don't understand accreditation and how it works. In the US, the highest level of accreditation that any college or university can achieve is called regional accreditation, and that is what we have. We're accredited with the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Again, the highest level of accreditation available to any university in the United States. We're also authorized by the state of Maryland, where we're located, to confer degrees all the way from the 2-year associates right up to the doctoral degrees. And I know that several of you in the audience have doctoral degrees from Capital, and several more are working on degrees, as well as those who may be working on bachelor's or master's as well. So thank you for joining us today. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to answer questions at the very end of the presentation, but you can post your question at any time in the text chat, and we will answer it as they come up. So anytime you have a comment, go ahead, or a question, go ahead and post it into the text chat. In the main, Dr. Charles will answer those questions at the conclusion of the presentation, but he may take a few as he goes if they're particularly pertinent. We're not activating microphones and webcams today for participants, so the way that we need to communicate from you back to us is via the text chat. And as I mentioned, a link to the recording and to the slides will be sent to all of you and to all registrants, even those who are not able to join us for the live session. And we will make this available on demand. And we also offer a participation certificate to those who watch us live or who watch the presentation on demand. And at the very end of the presentation, I'll mention how to get one of those if you want one. Now, I want to get right into the presentation, Open Source Intelligence, the Process, Method, and Techniques with Dr. Kellep Charles. Dr. Charles is going to do a little bit more introduction of himself during his presentation, but I want to hit some of the highlights before I give him the floor. Don't mind me, I'm going to read this so that I don't miss anything important. Dr. Kellep Charles is chair of cybersecurity programs at Capital Technology University. He serves as professor, director of cyber labs, and director of the Center for Cyber Research and Analysis for Capital. And might I say, I'm grateful to him for taking the time from his very busy schedule to present today. He completed his Doctor of Science degree in cybersecurity from Capital. He also holds an MS in Communication Management from the University of Maryland University College and a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University. He's worked as a government contractor in the Washington, D.C. area in information security for well over 20 years. In incident response, computer forensics, security assessments, malware analysis, and security operations. He's also, during that time, prior to coming on to working with us full-time, was an adjunct professor in computer science and cybersecurity. I want to also mention that he is the creator and executive editor of Security Orb, an information and security and privacy knowledge-based website. He has multiple certifications, and as you can see here, it's quite an interesting list, including certification from the NSA in assessment methodology and infrastructure. Now, with that, I want to give the floor to Dr. Charles, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen temporarily so that he can take over and share his screen.
Thank you.
And there we go. I can see it. So we're ready to go.
Okay, give me a quick second. Okay, so you're able to see my screen, correct?
I can see your screen now. You're in the presentation mode.
All right, great. Thank you. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in this presentation, Open Source Intelligence, the Process, Methods, and Technique. Before I get started, I would just like to share a disclaimer, because a lot of the information that I'll be sharing with you today can be weaponized to be used for various types of missions and various types of situations. So basically, you know, any views or opinions expressed in this presentation are solely my own, and they do not reflect, represent, or associate to my current or previous employers, including the organizations that I belong to. I do not, and I cannot provide any legal advice or recommendations. I do not condone nor encourage any type of malicious behavior from the information that you obtained today. And again, this presentation, the discussions that we have are solely for the purposes of information and educational awareness. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there before we get started. So let's get to the information. So for today, I plan to discuss and define what open source intelligence is, discuss some of the techniques and methods associated with it, as well as some of the processes when conducting an OSINT investigation and the framework. I'll do a review of some tools. Again, I'm not going to go into real in depth with many of the tools that are part of the OSINT framework, but I will cover some of the more popular tools and tools that I find to be very interesting. And I'll do a little discussion on the future of open source intelligence and take some questions at the very end. As Mr. Gibbs stated, I am the chairperson at Capital Technology University. I have multiple years of it as an information security practitioner, and I covered a wide range of information security areas, which leads to many of my research areas in incident response, digital forensics, vulnerability management and scanning, as well as open source intelligence. And I do hold some security-based certifications within the industry. So just wanted to kind of talk about my journey a little bit of how I became an OSINT practitioner. For those who know, well, I used to be a pen tester, a penetration tester, or an ethical hacker. And these are individuals that are asked by an organization to test my network for any type of vulnerabilities or weaknesses. And many times when an organization comes to you and asks you, hey, can you test my network? You don't have any information. So as part of the process, there's a reconnaissance phase where you try to collect information about the organization to help with your penetration testing activities. So a lot of this functionality could deal with looking for information on the internet, having social engineering conversations with employees, but anything that could give you an upper hand to help breach and compromise that particular organization in an ethical manner was part of the ethical hacking process. Also, as a digital forensics examiner, many times when you conduct a digital forensics examination and you were to get some sort of artifact, it might be an email address that's tied to the target, it may be a username, just some sort of information, and you need to find some more data. You need to be able to link it to a particular situation. You would also conduct some sort of internet searching, internet investigation to hopefully bring your case closer to being more successful. So a couple years have passed from being a practitioner in both of these particular fields where I was recruited to do open source intelligence. And as I was going through the initial training and some of the on-the-job training, I was like, okay, I've done this before. I've done this as a pen tester. I've done this as a digital forensics investigator. This should be pretty easy. And as I dealt more with the open source intelligence work, I realized that I was just scratching the surface. There are much more applications, much more techniques that if I knew these techniques when I was a pen tester or a digital forensics examiner, it would have made me a better practitioner within those fields. So again, that's how I kind of got into the world of open source intelligence. So before I get started, I just want to provide a definition so we all are on the same page when I talk about open source intelligence, or OSINT, which is the abbreviation. And basically, it's the collection and analysis of data gathered from open source sources to produce an actionable intelligence act against a target or a mission. And that last piece of it, against a target or a mission, is a very important component. As we know, when conducting a Google search on a person or a situation, you could get tons of information. So if you have a mission and if you have a target and you're using that collection and analysis process against that mission, you're able to have a more narrow focus and not have a lot of information that might not be necessary as part of your overall task that you're trying to perform. Now, some of the questions that have been asked in the past is, where is OSINT primarily used? And from my experience, I've used OSINT in national security functions. And this can be done to look at terrorism activities, domestic as well as non-domestic terrorism. What are the groups talking about? What are they saying? Where are they planning to meet? Who are the individuals within that particular group? Also within law enforcement, missing persons situations, that kind of information can aid within the OSINT framework. Also in business intelligence functions, what information is being provided about my organization? What public information is out there that competitors could use to gain a competitive advantage or conduct any type of activities against my organization? And lastly, within the information security function, where OSINT plays a part in red teaming. Red teaming is when you are trying to attack or compromise a particular target, as well as blue teaming. Blue teaming is that you're trying to protect your organization from being attacked. And knowing the type of information that is out there about your organization will help you defend and provide a stronger security posture. Now, in the intelligence community, when we talk about open, basically we're talking about this information is publicly available, it's overt, as compared to the word covert, where it is not publicly available. And to get information via covert may require something more intrusive, like wiretapping, breaking into someone's email and office to gain the information. But with open source intelligence, we're dealing with open source overt information. So as an instructor in my IAE 250 course, where we have a lengthy section on social engineering as well as open source intelligence, students will often ask, Dr. Charles, is open source intelligence legal? Like, you know, is this particular function legal and can you get in trouble for it? So the answer is yes, open source intelligence is legal. The information, the tools, how you gather the information is all legal and it's all publicly available. Now, certain individuals like hackers will use these techniques for illegal functions, and the results of the collection and what they do afterwards is illegal. But the collection, the processing, and the tools associated with open source intelligence is legal, and you know, you shouldn't worry about getting sent to jail or being in trouble. Another key thing that I try to emphasize is that as much information that you can collect in open source intelligence, it is not the silver bullet when it comes to an investigation. The open source intelligence is basically one of the key components within any type of investigative techniques, just like interviewing, surveillance, fingerprinting, and any other situation. So open source intelligence can be used to assist in asking more detailed interviewing questions, or from an interview, information may be obtained to help with an open source intelligence. So rarely do the open source intelligence become that silver bullet where you're like, aha, the case is solved and let's go home. It's part of the investigative process and needs to be used with other investigative process to be able to provide the outcome that is necessary. So you've heard me talk about open source intelligence, open or publicly available information. So here are some of the categories that are associated with publicly available information that an OSINT investigator may tap into. So for example, within the media category, you have newspaper, magazines, radios, as well as social media and websites like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. All of those are considered media, and these type of sources are available with open source tools and techniques. You also have public government data. When we talk about public government data, we're talking about public government reports, hearings, telephone directories, press conferences, and speeches. Those type of information can provide insight and guidance into an OSINT investigation. When we talk about professional and academic publications, we're talking about peer-reviewed journals, conferences, symposiums, dissertations, and theses. Those, again, do provide a lot of information that helps target a particular mission within the OSINT environment. And as well as commercial data dealing with commercial imagery from Google Maps, financial and industry assessments, business documents, unpublished works, as well as gray literature, where we talk about patents, working papers of those particular natures. And those are some of the categories that we reference when it comes to open source data. So within my IAE 250, when we're dealing with this particular topic, a lot of students normally sees OSINT as a new capability. And from my readings and research, OSINT has been around since World War II and maybe before that. When we talk about the older OSINT, basically the coverage of the final product was based on the information that they were able to find from, paper-based publications, like information they were able to find in libraries, flyers, just things of that particular nature. And basically the ability of the researcher, does the researcher go to a meeting of a terrorist group to be able to obtain flyers and information? So basically what you saw was what you got when it came to the older OSINT. And it was paper-based, it was in a folder, and it was what it was at that particular time. But with the recent, well, not recent, but with the introduction of the internet and the explosion of social media, it has elevated OSINT into a investigative capability that's comparable to human intelligence, signal intelligence, because of the abundance of data that can be found not only locally, but worldwide. And we'll talk more about that when it comes to OSINT methods. Basically, what you have is a multilingual, geographical, distributed, and completely unregulated platform where the individuals that are posting things about themselves and other individuals, which will help with the overall process. And at the bottom of the slide, I have this particular quote that, really explains the whole OSINT field, is that the street will find its own uses for things. And this was by an author, William Gibson. And what I surmise from this particular quote is that within the OSINT arena, when conducting an investigation, there are a lot of tools that are being used that were not initially created for OSINT investigation. It's just tools that, as an OSINT investigator, you're surmising that, hey, I should be able to find some information from this particular tool that will provide me the information that I'm looking for that will help my overall investigation. So one of the key things from this particular statement as well that I tell a lot of students when it comes to social engineering as well as OSINT practicing is that being in this particular field is an art and a science. And it's a 50-50. You need to have a curious mindset. You need to think out of the box a lot of times. And in having those type of characteristics will make the difference between a more proficient OSINT investigator as compared to those that kind of stay within the box and not take chances and look at things outside the box. So when we talk about OSINT, what threats can OSINT help you with? We talked about the different types of investigations and the different areas like intelligence and law enforcement. So when it comes to hacking, for example, if you are a hacker and you want to target a particular organization, you will conduct a social engineering OSINT investigation, grab as much information about that company or individual that you're trying to get access to, and conduct your particular attack. And about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was part of an actual situation where a CEO of an organization had just partnered with another company. And he received an email from the gentleman from the other company, and they were having some discussions, and it was very intimate, very detailed. And the other individual said, hey, I have this file that I want to send you. Take a look at it and let me know what you think. When the CEO of the company that hired me clicked on the link, his system started acting funny. And by the end of the day, they had some ransomware issues where it was determined by their internal system administrators that the file that was sent to them was an actual malware. So the CEO of the organization was kind of confused and very disturbed that a person that he just partnered with, attacked their organization. And the system administrator looked at the email address and noticed that the email address was not from the other individual's company, and it was more like a Gmail account. So they surmised that, this was not the actual individual. But the CEO was very convinced that it was that other individual because of the detail of information and activities that they talked about. So when I was kind of brought in to conduct an investigation to see what actually happened, and I looked at the email trail, I was able to find components of the email discussion on topics that were on social media. And the problem is, it's not that the CEO who brought me in was posting, even though he did post a couple of things. It was the individual from the other organization that was sharing a lot of detailed information, and the malicious individuals collected that information to target the CEO of the company that actually got breached. So again, this kind of information can be used for hacking attacks, as well as protecting your VIPs, your executives, as well as your organization from being hacked by knowing what is out there. And again, this is from information leakage. Is the information leakage coming in from your organization, or is it coming from another organization? But being able to understand what kind of information is out there and how much is being leaked is very helpful. It also protects, again, extreme activities. We talk about domestic and non-domestic extremists, geopolitical threats, fraud, violent attacks, as well as disinformation campaign. And disinformation campaign has been very streamlined in the headline of the news lately. And even as recent as about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, Meta/Facebook was able to identify a lot of fake accounts that would provide disinformation information. So again, that does play a big role. Now, we talked about a lot of the benefits as it relates to open source intelligence, and I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the risk. One of the main risks is that getting detected. If you're looking into a particular organization or a particular situation, and they see that you're coming from xyz.gov or XYZ law enforcement organization, basically there's a risk of getting detected, and whatever activity was being performed will be stopped. You also have the risk of losing access to that information. They may decide that, hey, we're being investigated. Let's stop using social media. Let's kind of stay away from the situation. And depending on what kind of investigation that you're doing and the severity of it, is the risk of becoming a victim yourself. The same techniques that you could use to find out what you're trying to do, these organizations that you're investigating can run it back on you. So if they determine that, hey, this IP address is coming from this organization or from this particular house or this particular username, they could use that and come after you depending on the type of organization that you're investigating. So one of the key things that we recommend when it comes to conducting OSINT investigation is to keep your identity private and not linked to the overall investigation. And there's a technique that is called sock puppets. And basically sock puppets are fake personas or alternative online identities used to collect and investigate during an open source intelligence investigation. And the key thing is to keep the investigator or the analysis identity totally separate from the sock puppet. And there's a few techniques that I'll share with you. I won't go too deep into this, but you'll have a copy of the slides, and this should be very helpful. So the first thing is that when you create any type of user account, you don't want your original IP to be recorded, because there are techniques that could take you to day one from when this account was created. So what is usually recommended is that you use a VPN, which will change your original IP address. You also have something that is called Tor, which is an anonymizer, or use a public Wi-Fi where you could create that particular user account. Certain platforms like Facebook won't allow you to create a user account via VPN or Tor without providing some sort of notification that this account was created using a masked IP address. So in that particular case, using a public Wi-Fi is highly recommended. Now, just because you've done that initial step using Tor and a VPN, this is a process that needs to be continued every time. So whenever you log into your sock puppet, whenever you log into OSINT, you want to make sure that you are masking your original IP address. So you want to continue to use the VPN, Tor, as well as Wi-Fi, because all it takes is one mistake for your IP address to be shown. And if you have a very capable, what we would call counterintelligence adversary, they'll be able to identify who you are. You also want to make your sock puppet as legitimate as possible by producing daily activities, liking, posting, doing everything that would be done under normal circumstances. One of the key things that's normally recommended is to use a fake name generator. There's a website called fakenamegenerator.com where you could go and say, hey, I want to create an individual. It'll provide a name as well as all the vital information that are necessary to an individual, such as mother's maiden name, height, weight, nationality. So again, it kind of helps you put all of that information together. The next thing that is highly recommended is to have an image associated with that name. What we found out is that if there's no image, basically the success and the likelihood of being able to integrate within a community that you may be trying to infiltrate is very low. So one of the key things that we recommend is to use a facial generator. Basically, it creates a unique identity using artificial intelligence. We recommend that you never, ever use a picture of another individual as part of your image. I'm not sure if anyone has ever seen the show Catfish that comes on MTV. One of the first things that they do is that they use a reverse image generator. So basically, they'll take that image, they'll put it into this application, it'll search the internet, and it'll show you where this image was originally used. And if your name is John Smith, and they use the image reverse generator, and they see that it's connected to Tom Smith, they'll know like, okay, something is fishy here. So with using a facial generation application like this person does not exist, it creates a unique identity image of a person that you could use. So I have 3 images that are being displayed right now. And all of these images were created from this person does not exist, where these people do not exist. So if you put this in a reverse image generator, it won't come back to any particular individual. Kind of scary, but it is one of the key things that does exist. It's recommended that you use an email address. So again, when creating the email address, gmail.com, yahoo.com is fine. And again, you want to make sure that you mask your original IP address. It's always recommended to have a burner phone because many of these services will use your phone for verification and 2-factor authentication. So again, you don't want to use your original phone. You want to use a burner phone to, again, keep your information separate. And there are online credit cards and paying by cache that you could use, again, to further keep your identity away from that. And the last thing that I'd like to share is it's normally recommended to have more than one sock puppet. So in case something goes wrong, you have one that's already active, one that already has some time, and you could kind of put that into play. One of the key things about having a sock puppet is understanding the privacy information with all these different platforms, because as they change, it may change the amount of visibility that's associated with your sock puppet. So again, staying on top of that is very important. A couple of key things that I want to talk about is when we talk about OSINT methods is that you have what are known as passive and active. When we talk about passive OSINT methods, basically you're doing search, you're not interacting with the target, and basically you're collecting the information. With active methods, there is some level of interaction. It may be that if there's an extremist website and they have a booklet or some sort of pamphlet, and you need to sign on to be able to download or get access to that pamphlet, you're doing some sort of active method to sign on to the website to be able to gain that. Again, there is still a level of anonymity that's going on, but again, that email might be registered on that particular website. So again, those are the two methods that you really need to understand. As I get closer to the end of the presentation, I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about what is known as the OSINT process. And basically, this is the steps that are normally taken when an OSINT investigator is conducting a mission. The first one is planning and direction. When someone says, hey, we need to conduct an investigation on an individual, you need to have a direction and to plan for that direction. Again, if you're doing an OSINT investigation and you don't have any direction, as we know with the amount of information that is available, you'll be providing maybe 40, 50, 90% of information that is not useful. But if you're trying to find a particular mission, a particular task, within the planning and direction, you'll prepare to look for information towards that targeted mission. You also have processing, where basically once you've identified the process, you start processing the information. You're looking for common repositories. For example, if it's something pertaining to a missing person, having images to kind of help, looking at timelines and different aspects pertaining to that. Again, keeping the efficiency very important. Now, the analysis and production, this is where within the cycle that it will allow your team to use the data that you've acquired to interpret and anticipate various events. So again, you initially collected the information and you're looking through to make sure that this information is related to the target or to the mission. For example, you could have a John Smith, and when you do a social media search for user names for John Smith, it may be a John Smith from Oklahoma or John Smith from Missouri. So again, you want to make sure that you're targeting and you're collecting information from the correct John Smith. And again, this is a very important process here. And we'll talk more about why the analysis portion is very, very important. And from here is where you'll either disseminate the information and give it to leadership or the requester of the information, or you'll integrate the information that's collected to be part of another investigative process, such as signal analysis or the interviewing process. And again, when we talk about OSINT is one of the arrows within the investigative process, this is what happens at this particular end when you do provide the overall and detailed information. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the tools. One of the tools that I'd like to talk about is something that is called the OSINT framework. And as you can see, there are tons of categories. So for example, if someone says, hey, I have a username of a target, you could go to the username section, and once you select that, it'll provide you some additional information all the way till you get to the end node to use that particular tool. So in this particular example here, we have an IP address. We have these particular categories like, is it a geolocation? Is it an IP4 IP address? Is it a blacklist IP address? We say it's a host IP address that we discovered from our IDS system. And once we select that, these are the tools that we could use to help with our investigation. So again, this is a good way to start when you do have a piece of information and you're trying to get more data on it, is to use the OSINT framework. Now, when conducting any type of OSINT investigation, there are four main foundations that you need to understand. Multi-layered, cyber geography, mixed method, as well as tangibility. When we talk about multi-layered, one of the key things to understand is that 4% of the information that we access when we talk about the internet and cyberspace is on the surface web. It's when you go to Google, when you call up your Google browser and you type the URLs and stuff like that, you're only dealing with 4% of the information that's on the entire net. And that information is indexed and it's made to be a user-friendly interface so you can access that information. But as an OSINT investigator, 95% of the information that is on the net is in the deep web and the dark web. So if you're only using the surface web, you're not using the full capabilities that are needed to be an OSINT investigator. To access the dark web, there are special tools that, if you email me, I could share some of those tools with you. And to access the dark web, you need to use, as I stated in the beginning, the Onion router, Tor, and in accessing Tor, you'll be able to get on the dark web and access a lot of the information on there. One of the key things, everyone always asks me, how do I get to the dark web? I want to go to the dark web. The dark web has a lot of illegal activities and black market information on there. And, you should only go to the dark web unless there's a reason to go to the dark web. There's a lot of disturbing things that are on there, things that could affect your mental health. So again, keep that in mind, when you're trying to investigate the dark web. The dark web, a lot of the links in the dark web are very hard to remember. So this is an example from a very famous site called the Hidden Wiki on the dark web, where it just has a lot of random characters where it's practically impossible to remember. But the key thing is that many of the sites that are on the dark web has a .onion suffix to it, where we might have .com, .ca, .net. Dark web websites have .onions to kind of differentiate themselves. But again, the links are very hard to remember and see. So again, this is what we talk about multi-layered. When we talk about cyber geography, is that, if you're conducting a search on someone that is based in the Middle East or in Asia or in Russia, doing a search from google.com may not find all the information that you're looking for. So you need to understand that using cyber geography as part of the investigation is very important. One of the key tasks that I do in my particular class is that I'll have students search various types of topics around the world. So I'll have them search Boko Haram, Tiananmen Square, and a couple different topics and see what the results they get. Then the next iteration of the assignment is to use that particular country redirect and conduct the same kind of scans and the same kind of searches. And the results are usually exponentially different. So again, cyber geography is very important when it comes to OSINT investigations. Also mixed media, it might be PDF files, PowerPoint files, movie files. So again, understanding different types of media that an organization, a website, or an individual may be part of definitely is very important within the process as well. And the last portion is tangibility. The tangibility comes from, I guess, my early time as a digital forensics examiner. A lot of times when we were having forensics investigations or different types of things, and we were trying to use the internet more for searches, and a lot of the, I'll call old school law enforcement, didn't really see the tangibility of how important the internet is to modern world. That's less of a case right now, but again, you need to make sure that just like the physical world and investigation in the physical world, the internet holds just as much valuable information, and it should be taken into consideration. The two things that I wanted to talk with as it relates to web browser is the concept of flexibility with tab browsing. Being able to use tab browsing to have multiple sites up at the same time in one web browser. This makes the investigation very efficient, especially if you're using multiple monitors. So you're able to have a Google search as well as a Bing search, as well as have tab browsing to have all the information that you're looking for. Another key thing in using Chrome as well as Firefox is extendability. Being able to add add-ons to extend your investigation, to add additional functionality to the particular web browser that will help you find and collect information. And due to the interest of time, I won't go into many of these applications, but these are some of the applications that you could add as extendability add-ons to the web browser. Resurrect page, to be able to call up a web page that's no longer in existence. The subject might have taken the page down because they know they're being investigated. So Resurrect Page and Memento Fox will be able to bring archive and cache web pages where you can look for information that might be incriminating. We have archiving tools where if you see YouTube videos, or if you want to take screenshots as well as save text to a file, all of this could be done from the web browser by using various types of add-ons. We talked about image search. If you have a particular image and you're trying to find this particular individual, you have Google Image, which works very well as TinyEye, where all you need to do is drag the image into the application, and it'll show you all the source locations of where that image is being used. One of the key things that is very important within the OSINT toolkit are meta search engines. So when we talk about searching using Google and Bing, those are what are considered single source search engines. And anyone who's dealt with intelligence or investigation, single source is really not a good thing. So you want to use multiple sources, and this is where the meta search engines kind of come in. So for example, when we talk about Zula, it uses Google, Yahoo, and Bing to conduct its queries. So again, instead of having 3 different search engines that you need to access, you're accessing a component that has multiple search engines. Dogpile has Google and Yahoo. Alimeter has Google, Yahoo, Bing, and Ask, and Carrot 2 also has Google and Bing, but it also has a visual cloud tagging component that is very nice. So again, meta search engines are very helpful. Another key thing that I often recommend is downloading or having access to an OSINT virtual machine. A virtual machine basically is a software abstraction of an operating system and application. So by downloading this OSINT virtual machine, basically the developer has created an operating system that has all the tools that you will need to conduct OSINT investigations. Just like for those who are familiar with Kali Linux for pen testers and hackers, where all the tools that are needed to conduct a hacking or pen test activity is available in that operating system. OSINT Virtual Machine by Trace Labs is the equivalent for OSINT Investigation. It has a lot of really good tools to help the investigator. And Trace Labs is an excellent organization, which I'm part of, and they have what are called search parties. They are nonprofit organizations, and they help with missing person cases to find individuals, and they are beneficial to society and help. And so if you get a chance, definitely check out Trace Labs and see some of the good work that they do. With that being said, I want to talk a little bit about the future of OSINT. The future of OSINT is leaning and going towards machine learning and artificial intelligence. Basically, a lot of these functions that we're talking about that you could do with Firefox and Google to look for information, collect information, sift through the information, artificial intelligence and machine learning applications are coming into play where it can conduct those particular functionalities for you in a more automated way. It's still not 100% there, but they're getting very close. So a lot of research in doctoral dissertations and other companies are looking to see how they could add artificial intelligence as well as machine learning into the process. So I just want to conclude, when it comes to OSINT, both amateur and professional criminals are using these sophisticated strategies to conduct what they want to do. Is it good or is it for the bad? And basically, the information is growing. We're creating more content, more individuals are coming onto the internet. So the OSINT information is becoming very largely available. Evolving threats require the ability to predict as an organization. So again, there is information out there. You need to be able to understand what information out there and have a strategy to defend yourself against that. And not only can OSINT help protect against intentional attacks, such as leaks, theft, and fraud, but it has the ability to gain real-time and location-based situational awareness. That's a new area. Well, it's not a new area, but it's an area called real-time OSINT. And it's been used a lot during the Arab Springs and whenever there's any type of uprising in a location, and you want to know what's going on in real time, not have information filtered by the local government. And using real-time OSINT, you're able to see what's going on in real time and you're able to get information from people on the floor. And that's another topic, discussion. But again, real-time OSINT is very popular and is growing in popularity as well. So I do apologize for rushing, but I know we were on a time constraint and I wanted to have some time for questioning. So at this point, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Well, Dr. Charles, thank you very much. We will answer the questions, but I want to put it a little aside here. I'm going to go back to my screen and start sharing. And I want to just bounce ahead very quickly to let me get to where I need to go. All right, just give me a moment. Sure. We always pledge in these programs to finish in an hour officially. Now, if Dr. Charles has time, we're going to take questions after the top of the hour. But for those who do need to log off, get back to work, or whatever you need to do, I want to real quickly cover a couple of things of housekeeping order and then come right back to the questions. So if you have to log out, you'll have this information and then you can go on. Stay tuned if you have questions and you want them answered. We'll go through those in a moment. Upcoming webinars. We've got another webinar coming on November 17th with Dr. Kareem Perry, Physics informed machine learning, the next evolution in neural network development. And Dr. Reginald Freeman on January 19th, transformational leadership, leading and following from the front. Dr. Freeman, by the way, is chief of the fire department for the city of Oakland, California. He knows what he's talking about when he's leading a diverse group of people. And then Darren Dillow on our faculty on February 16th, the occupational safety and health emphasis on mental well-being. On that session, Darren will be looking more deeply at a shift in occupational safety and health, focusing much more on mental well-being, when recent studies indicate that 90% of the Americans feel that there is a mental health problem in America. This will make sense to visit that session. Now, several of you have asked if, and this is where you can register for any of those upcoming sessions. Several of you have asked if you can get a certificate of participation for today, and the answer is yes. I'll be sending out an email later this afternoon that will include a link to the recording, a link to the slides on SlideShare, and the option to get a certificate of completion if you wish to have one. All you have to do is respond to that email with the name you want on certificate, and I'll fire that back off to you. Now, with that, I want to, that's the end of the formal presentation, but I want to come back to the Q&A, and let's see here. We'll kind of stay right in here, I think. There are a lot of questions, and again, some of you may have already logged off for the questions I'm going to ask. As I promised, we're going to start at the top and kind of move through them. Some of these would have been answered as the presentation went on, some have not been, but let me start. George asks, is forensic testimony evidence generally more extensive in scope in federal courts versus state or local courts?
No, the evidence process is about the same. Definitely are some differences when it comes to that. The main difference that I've experienced came in testimony. You know, as a forensics examiner, you have two groups. You have, you know, being able to testify on a case or be an expert witness or, you know, expert testimony. When we talk about testimony, basically you're only able to talk about the case, you know, just talk about the facts and can't add anything extra. But if you're doing expert testimony, you can add your opinion and add some extra components into it. The problem with expert testimony is that, you know, your background is scrutinized very hard. And if there are some blemishes in your background, you know, like misquoting something, the defense could use that, or the prosecution can use that against you. So that's one of the key things when it comes to testimony. But as for evidence, the rules of evidence pretty much are very closely related, both in state and federal.
Thank you. George further asked a question that was actually answered by Dr. Joshua Sinai, having to do with, can you get in trouble reviewing material on the dark web? And Dr. Sinai has an excellent answer to that. And Dr. Prelot also said, I would think if we visit the dark web looking for open source intelligence, we might want to perform that type of data on a machine that's sandboxed or virtually isolated. And you talked about that earlier. Another question had to do with, should you have a burner laptop? And the answer to that would be no, not really, but you should have a virtual laptop, right?
I mean, either or. Some individuals will have a burner laptop where, for performance purposes, they will have a laptop that has the software on there, and that laptop has no linkage. And some individuals will use a virtual environment, you know, if they're unable to have a burner laptop. From my experience and my previous employer, we had burner laptops, you know, for performance purposes. So we did have a laptop that was dedicated for investigative purposes. But I know individuals that are very successful subject matter experts that will have a virtual image on top of their personal laptop, and they are fine as well.
As Aslak asks, if someone leaks information that is not regarded as open source, either as a mistake or deliberately, when does it become a problem regarding the law? For example, he specifically said mainstream media sharing information. And then Ty said, isn't that protected under federal law for media? And that is an intriguing question. At what point does the media drop into trouble? Sharing information.
That's something someone with a law background could understand a lot better. I know from a corporate aspect where information is leaked by an employee, either intentional or by mistake. If it's a private company, they have their internal security plans and process and how to handle that particular situation. If it's in the government space, the Office of Inspector General usually kind of come into play. So I could speak of it from that particular aspect, but all the other aspects, I think someone with a law background could probably answer that a lot better.
All right, thank you. Ty made a very interesting comment. He said, one of my friends was a sex crimes detective in Maryland and used a sock puppet. They were successful in capturing criminals seeking underage targets, but it was very hard for them emotionally to separate that fake persona from their real life.
Yeah, and one of the key things when it comes to digital forensics as well as investigative process, it was something that wasn't really talked about 10 years ago, but there is a mental health aspect that's associated with this type of work and environment. One of the key things also when it comes to sock puppets, and there's a psychological component to this, is that we find that sock puppets that are female-based have a much higher successful in investigations and being included than that are male-based sock puppets. So a lot of times is that you'll have sock puppets that are female-based and you'll have a male that is directing that particular puppet, and it takes a lot of understanding of that particular side to keep that particular persona up and going. So it is very difficult, especially if you're using something that's out of your normal operational and comfort zone.
I could certainly understand that, especially if, for example, if you were had a sock puppet that was a teenage girl and trying to figure out that type of persona and how to sound authentic. By the way, this is an aside, but last night when reviewing your slides, I went to Fake Name Generator and I discovered that I am actually James Sanderson. I live on Beach Avenue in Walnut Creek, California, and I'm 28 years old. All of which came to a vast surprise to my wife of 47 years. Anyway, coming back to the subject at hand, is there Paxton Allen asks an intriguing question that is not directly related to the presentation, but is. It says, is there a consideration for adding an OSINT or intelligence track to the MS in cybersecurity here at Capitol?
Yes, so I'm actually in the process of creating an OSINT course, 8-week OSINT course that will be part of the master's program and eventually creating one for the undergrad program. It's very key, as I stated, if you're interested in pen testing, red teaming, blue teaming, as well as forensics investigation. So I've been working very diligently on that. And my goal is hopefully by the summertime, we'll be offering our first OSINT course that has the ability to use OSINT tools and also have what are known as an OSINT capture the flag as part of the final exam, which will allow you to use all the various techniques to find a lot of information, including some dark web activities as well.
Wow, that would be neat. I'm looking at the comments and the questions in the chat, and they are primarily questions. One just came in, and I think we'll have this as the final question. George, you're a faithful viewer of these webinars, so I'll give you the last word on this. Will AI become a standard opening expert witness for forensics? That's an intriguing question.
Will AI become an
An expert
standard?
witness in forensics. Do you envision that they're going to be using AI as in a forensics witnessing?
So the thing is, whenever you use any type of tools to be able to use as evidence within law enforcement, is that it needs to be able to stand the forensic science mantra, which is integrity. So as long as they're able to build a tool that it could provide integrity, it show, if it's digital information and it shows that it's been hashed, and it could stand the forensics requirements, it could definitely become AI and machine learning can become part of the forensics, for expert witness. For example, in network security, you have intrusion detection tools that can capture information in real time, store that information, and add a hash to it. So at that portion, it becomes forensically available that it can be used in court. Same thing with log analyzers. If there's a log file that comes in and those log files are being hashed, that can be used within the court of law. So again, the OSINT tools that are created using machine learning and artificial intelligence, if it needs to be used in court for evidence, has to follow the forensics process, and it has to be hashed to show that, time and integrity associated with it.
Well, with that, I'm going to stop here. I just, since we're talking about AI and machine learning, not quite the same thing as AI, but related, just as a reminder that next month on November 17th, Dr. Perry will be talking about machine learning. He's just recently in the last year completed his PhD in this area, is working in the field. I think this will be a great presentation. With that, I want to stop. I want to thank all of you who've actually hung with us for these extra 7 minutes. I want to thank Dr. Charles for an incredibly interesting presentation, even for a layman such as myself. I learned quite a bit today. So thank you very much for this. And again, as a reminder, slides and the link to the recording will be sent to you, as well as the opportunity to get an attendance certificate if you should desire one. Watch for that email later this afternoon. Thank you, everybody. With that, we are officially done. And thank you for those who've stuck with us here for these extra few minutes. You all have a great afternoon. And again, thank you, Dr. Charles.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you.